What if stupidity isn't the lack of intelligence, but the decision to hand it over? What if the real danger to human civilization isn't the cruel but the mindless? The people who stop thinking, stop questioning, and start moving like a crowd. Machiavelli understood something most people still refuse to face. It's not evil that destroys empires. It's stupidity dressed as virtue. The brutal truth is this: stupid people don't know they're stupid. That's what makes them dangerous. They act with confidence, speak with certainty, and cause damage while believing they're doing good. They proudly stand under banners of morality, convinced they're saving the world, when in reality they're feeding the very systems that keep them weak and obedient. Stupidity isn't about IQ, it's about surrender. It's what happens the moment you stop thinking for yourself and start outsourcing your mind to teachers, bosses, influencers, crowds, and systems that don't care if you stay blind, as long as you stay compliant. From the classroom to the workplace, you're conditioned into this. You're not trained to think, you're trained to repeat. Sit down, be quiet, memorize, obey. You're rewarded for compliance, not for insight. And slowly, without noticing, your independent thought begins to rot. You don't argue with ideas, you repeat them. You don't investigate reality, you accept the version handed to you. Machiavelli would look at this world and he wouldn't be shocked. He'd be impressed by how efficient the manipulation has become. He warned that ignorance, once weaponized, can bring down entire civilizations. A fool who doesn't think is more dangerous than a villain who does. Today, stupidity scrolls, tweets, comments, argues, but rarely thinks. It hides behind hashtags and slogans. It confuses volume with truth and emotion with logic. And the few who still stop to think are shamed for it, called cynical, arrogant, extreme, or dangerous, while the obedient are celebrated as good citizens. Here's the Machiavellian reality. Independent thought is rebellion. In a world built on mental submission, thinking for yourself is the final act of power. Stupidity isn't natural. It's trained. It's rewarded. And if you can unlearn what the world conditioned you to believe, you'll stop seeing life as they told you it is and start seeing it as it actually is. Before we go further, lock in one idea. No one can take your mind. You either use it or you hand it over. To mark that line, drop this affirmation in the comments. I refuse to surrender my mind. Now, the first ruthless truth. Number 1. Stupidity is not born, it's built. Nobody enters the world as a fool. Every child begins with a mind full of curiosity, a hunger to explore, a natural impulse to ask why. That's intelligence in its rawest form. But over time, that spark gets dimmed. Not by nature, but by systems. Instead of rewarding curiosity, the world starts rewarding obedience. You're trained not to think freely, but to follow. Not to search for truth, but to memorize answers. You learn that acceptance is safer than awareness, that standing out is risky, and blending in keeps you out of trouble. Slowly, thinking becomes dangerous. Silence becomes survival. From early on, most people are locked into patterns. Repeat after the teacher, copy what works, agree with the majority, don't be difficult. This is how stupidity is manufactured, not as an accident, but as a design. It grows every time someone chooses comfort over curiosity. Every time a person stops asking why, they lose the ability to see how. At that point, they stop being individuals. They become echoes. They repeat what others say, believe what others believe, feel what others tell them to feel. Their mind is no longer a weapon. It's a tunnel for someone else's agenda. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He knew a prince doesn't truly control the wise, he controls the obedient. Real power doesn't come from force. It comes from getting people to stop thinking for themselves. Once someone no longer questions what they're told, they become easy to direct, easy to flatter, easy to deceive. That's the silent tragedy of human intelligence. It's rarely destroyed. It's surrendered. The world praises obedience more than awareness. The one who asks questions is labeled negative, difficult, rebellious. The one who nods along is labeled good and polite. They confuse politeness with wisdom, conformity with intelligence, repetition with truth. If you want to escape this invisible cage, you have to reclaim your sight. Think with your own eyes. Don't just repeat, reflect. Don't obey blindly, observe deeply. Thinking is not rebellion, it is self-respect. The moment you stop surrendering your mind, you stop seeing the world through the lens others handed you and you start seeing it clearly. That clarity is rare. And because it's rare, it's powerful. If you're ready to step out of the herd, drop this in the comments. I choose awareness over obedience. Number 2. The most dangerous fool is the confident one. Confidence without understanding is wildfire, uncontrolled, destructive, and unpredictable. A fool who doubts himself is inconvenient, but a fool who is absolutely certain he's right can destroy reason itself. This is the most dangerous form of stupidity, loud, proud, and immune to reflection. These are the people who never question what they believe. They never examine their own logic. They never consider the possibility that they might be wrong. They speak with authority, act with arrogance, and persuade others not because they're correct, but because they sound like they are. And when ignorance wears the mask of confidence, deception spreads faster than truth ever could. Machiavelli warned us, men are simple, and those who deceive will always find people willing to be deceived. The confident fool becomes a magnet. People follow certainty, not wisdom. A loud voice feels safer than a quiet, thoughtful one. But real strength lies in doubt. The wise person says, I might be wrong, because only someone who thinks deeply understands how complex truth really is. But the confident fool doesn't see complexity. He divides the world into simple categories, right or wrong, good or bad, us or them. This simplicity comforts him, but it blinds him to reality. A confident fool cannot grow. He cannot learn. He cannot evolve. He lives inside the illusion of his own intelligence. Every argument becomes a fight. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every new idea becomes an enemy. And because certainty feels powerful, people imitate it. This is how foolishness spreads not through stupidity alone, but through the mimicry of arrogance. If you ever want to separate the wise from the foolish, watch how they handle doubt. The wise question themselves first. The fool never questions anything, especially not himself. Confidence without clarity is chaos. And if you want to break free from that chaos, drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose clarity over arrogance. Number 3. Stupidity hides behind morality. Human stupidity rarely shows up uncovered. It disguises itself in virtue. People want to believe their actions are guided by goodness, righteousness, and pure intention. They assume that because they mean well, they must be right. But purity without understanding is dangerous. Some of the worst decisions in human history were made by people who believed they were doing the right thing. The fool uses morality as a shield. It gives him power without accountability. When someone believes they're good, they stop examining the consequences of their actions. They stop thinking. They start justifying. Emotion replaces logic. Conviction replaces clarity. Compassion becomes confusion. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He said that good intentions are the perfect disguise for manipulation. When someone feels morally superior, they become impossible to reason with. They don't listen, they preach. They don't consider, they condemn. Morality itself isn't the problem. The problem is the illusion that morality makes you intelligent. Kindness without awareness becomes weakness. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Goodness without reflection becomes stupidity. Modern society rewards shallow virtue, performative kindness, public compassion, moral slogans, emotional outrage. People compete to appear righteous. They want the image of goodness, not the substance of understanding. And soon, stupidity hides behind the language of virtue. The wise stay silent, while the self-righteous shout. Intelligence becomes invisible beneath the noise of moral performance. The fool doesn't realize his morality is just a costume for his ego. He craves righteousness because it gives him identity. True integrity doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to announce itself. It is the quiet backbone of awareness. Machiavelli would remind you, morality becomes dangerous when it stops asking questions. The moment you believe you're always right, your mind stops growing. And where learning ends, stupidity begins. If you refuse to let your goodness blind your judgment, drop this in the comments. I choose awareness over virtue. Number 4. The system profits from your stupidity. Stupidity isn't just a flaw, it's fuel. The world has learned to harvest it. The less you think, the more predictable you become. And predictability is gold. It allows corporations, governments, influencers, and institutions to shape your desires, manipulate your emotions, and guide your behavior without ever forcing you. The system doesn't need to limit intelligence. It only needs to distract it. Distraction is the most profitable invention of the modern age. Your mind is currency. Your attention is a commodity. Every scroll, every click, every impulsive reaction feeds an economy built on mental passivity. The less you reflect, the more you consume. The less you question, the more you obey. The more you react, the easier you are to control. Machiavelli said, "He who controls perception controls power." And today, perception is the battlefield. Once your attention is controlled, your power is gone. People stop thinking deeply. They settle for headlines instead of facts, trends instead of principles, emotion instead of logic. Stupidity has been repackaged as convenience. You're given endless choices, none of which lead to freedom, only to distraction. The system doesn't want your awareness. It wants your engagement. It measures success not by truth, but by reaction. People mistake comfort for happiness. They believe stimulation equals progress. But stimulation is sedation, and sedation is control. The few who wake up, the ones who reclaim their time, their attention, their mind, become difficult to manipulate. Awareness makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability threatens the system. If you choose to reclaim your focus, write this in the comments. I control my focus. Number 5. Stupidity is power without awareness. Power without awareness is a weapon in untrained hands. It injures without intention. It destroys without understanding. A foolish person may hold authority, influence, or status, but without awareness he reacts instead of reflects. He mistakes boldness for intelligence. He confuses control with competence. He believes strength makes him right. Machiavelli warned, "The wise act immediately. The fool acts eventually." Awareness allows anticipation. Stupidity acts first and thinks later. A fool with power spreads his ignorance like wildfire. His decisions mislead others, multiply confusion, and cause destruction. Not because he seeks it, but because he cannot see beyond himself. Power multiplies stupidity when awareness is missing. People follow him because he looks confident, because he acts decisively, because people crave certainty. But certainty without understanding is the root of disaster. Awareness separates true leadership from noisy authority. The unthinking desire power to feel safe. The aware cultivate understanding to stay grounded. Without awareness, power becomes a cage. It traps you inside your own illusions. You believe your own hype. You stop learning because everyone agrees with you. You stop observing because everyone praises you. And that illusion becomes your downfall. True power starts with mastery over yourself. If you want to rise above the blind pursuit of strength, drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose awareness before power. Number 6. The crowd doesn't want truth. It wants certainty. People claim they want the truth, but most of the time they don't. Truth is messy. Truth is uncomfortable. Truth forces you to think, to doubt, to reconsider everything you assumed was solid. And most people don't want that burden. What they truly crave is comfort. Certainty feels safe. It gives people a stable story to hold on to when reality feels too complicated. This is why the crowd will almost always choose a simple lie over a complex truth. Thinking requires courage, and courage is rare. Doubt requires strength, and strength is uncommon. So people trade truth for peace of mind. They don't seek understanding. They seek reassurance. Machiavelli warned, people are driven more by illusion than reason. Illusion offers emotional security. It makes people feel correct even when they're completely wrong. And when emotion replaces thought, stupidity becomes the foundation of their beliefs. The crowd follows the loudest voice, not the wisest one. A confident liar feels more trustworthy to them than a thoughtful thinker. Certainty becomes the new deity, the thing people worship because it soothes them, even if it leads them astray. People defend false ideas like they're sacred. Not because those ideas are true, but because certainty feels like safety. Lies thrive because they promise simplicity. Truth stands alone because it demands effort. The wise understand that doubt is not weakness, it is awareness. The thinking mind can sit with uncertainty. The foolish mind cannot. It panics in the presence of ambiguity and clings to whatever feels stable, even if it's false. That's why people often fight passionately for beliefs they've never examined. Certainty is a drug, and the more people rely on it, the more incapable they become of seeing reality clearly. The crowd would rather be told what to believe than learn how to think. Machiavelli would remind you, truth has never belonged to the majority. If you want to rise above the masses, you must learn to stand in uncertainty without fear. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose truth over comfort. Number 7. Intelligence becomes rebellion. Intelligence isn't measured by how much you know. It's measured by how deeply you question. The moment someone begins to think independently, they naturally drift away from the collective mindset. True intelligence doesn't chase agreement. It chases understanding. This is why the intelligent person often feels like an outsider. Awareness separates you from the crowd. When you begin to notice patterns others ignore, when you question assumptions everyone accepts, your mind naturally pulls you into a space of solitude. Society rewards obedience, not reflection. So, when intelligence awakens, it disrupts the comfortable rhythm of the masses. The crowd wants harmony, even if it's false. The thinker wants clarity, even if it's painful. That difference creates distance, and that distance is often perceived as arrogance. Machiavelli understood the danger of new ideas. He wrote that nothing is more difficult than introducing a new order of things. People resist what they don't understand. They fear what makes them think. Intelligence is rebellion because it cannot be controlled. It doesn't fight the system. It outgrows it. The more someone understands, the less they depend on approval. Independence becomes a natural byproduct of awareness, and controlled minds hate this. They call it arrogance because it exposes their own submission. When you no longer seek validation, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability breaks the spell of conformity. Intelligent people often experience loneliness, not because they want isolation, but because the world prefers simplicity over depth. Their silence is mistaken for pride. Their caution is labeled coldness. Their insight is misinterpreted as negativity. But their distance is protection, a shield against the noise of shallow thinking. Intelligence pokes holes in illusions. It questions traditions and beliefs that have existed for generations without logic. The wise don't reject society. They simply refuse to surrender their perception to it. Thinking deeply isn't rebellion against others, it's loyalty to reality. Machiavelli would remind you, true power begins with self-understanding, and self-understanding begins the moment imitation ends. If you step onto that path, isolation is the price, but clarity is the reward. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I think beyond conformity. Number 8. Stupidity loves slogans, not questions. The modern fool is fluent in repetition but illiterate in reflection. Words become weapons only when they're used with intention. But for the unthinking crowd, words become armor, a shield against responsibility. Slogans replace thinking. Phrases replace inquiry. Repetition replaces understanding. People want simple answers, neat lines, easy phrases, something they can memorize without ever examining. Be kind. Follow your heart. Trust the process. These sound intelligent. They feel wise. But they're shallow when repeated without thought. Slogans eliminate accountability. If everyone repeats the same thing, no one has to think. Questions are dangerous. They require effort, introspection, and sometimes uncomfortable truths. Curiosity threatens certainty, and certainty is the idol of the unthinking. Machiavelli understood this. Perception can be controlled through words even when those words contain no truth. That's why slogans are powerful. They unite the mindless and isolate the thoughtful. The more someone repeats, the less they reason. They confuse memorization with wisdom, agreement with intelligence, approval with clarity. Meanwhile, the thinking individual becomes an outsider, the one who asks, why? The one who disrupts the chorus. Questions are rebellion. Every time someone stops questioning and starts echoing, they feed the inertia of collective ignorance. Awareness is the antidote. Thinking for yourself is an act of mental resistance. If you refuse to join the chorus of repetition, write this affirmation. I question over repeating. Number 9. The fool is certain, the wise are uncertain. Certainty is the comfort blanket of the unthinking. The fool wraps himself in it, convinced that his conclusions are absolute and his judgments flawless. He believes he fully understands the world, as if something as complex as reality can be broken into simple categories and permanent truths. This unwavering confidence is what makes him dangerous. Not because he is evil, but because he acts without thinking. He moves without questioning. He attacks without understanding. The wise, on the other hand, embrace uncertainty. They know their knowledge has limits. They understand that perception is fragile and truth is layered. They recognize that every belief must be examined, every conclusion revisited, every insight refined. Doubt is not hesitation. Doubt is awareness. The more a person knows, the more they realize how much they don't know. That humility gives them caution, patience, and the ability to see reality more clearly. Meanwhile, the unthinking mind sees doubt as weakness, because doubt threatens the illusion of competence. Machiavelli once said that men judge more by appearances than by reality. Everyone has eyes, but very few can see beneath the surface. The fool thinks appearances are reality. He refuses to question deeper because examining himself would shatter the illusion of certainty he depends on. Certainty and stupidity are partners. Certainty shields the mind from reflection. Reflection is what exposes ignorance. So the fool avoids reflection entirely. He convinces himself that learning is unnecessary, that his current beliefs are complete, that the world is as simple as he imagines. He cannot comprehend perspectives outside his own because uncertainty terrifies him. The wise embrace uncertainty as a companion, not an enemy. They navigate complexity. They accept nuance. They allow truth to evolve. This is why wisdom is rare. It requires comfort with discomfort. Certainty feels good. Uncertainty feels vulnerable. But only uncertainty leads to growth. The fool acts quickly, thinking he cannot fail. The wise act deliberately, aware of consequence. One lives in reaction, the other in strategy. Machiavelli would remind us, the mind that doubts is the mind that rules itself. When you embrace uncertainty, you become immune to the lies, illusions, and simplistic thinking that manipulate the masses. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I embrace doubt over certainty. Number 10. Thinking is the last form of freedom. In a world where most people surrender their minds, thinking becomes rebellion. Freedom isn't just the ability to move or choose. It's the ability to reflect, analyze, and decide independently. When society conditions you to obey, to repeat, to avoid discomfort, the act of genuine thinking becomes a threat to the norm. Thinking is the last stronghold of autonomy. Every mind that refuses to be passive reclaims ownership of itself. To think deeply is to resist being shaped by opinions, distractions, narratives, and illusions. It is to observe the world without surrendering to it, to respond with intention instead of reacting blindly. Machiavelli said that constant success requires adapting your conduct with the times. A thinker understands that life is fluid. Truth shifts. Circumstances evolve. Assumptions expire. That's why the thinking individual refuses to be anchored to popular beliefs or comforting illusions. In a world of followers, the thinker stands alone not because of pride, but because of clarity. Independent thought separates the awake from the obedient. While others repeat, the thinker reflects. While others react, the thinker perceives. While others cling to simplicity, the thinker navigates complexity. Thinking restores the power that others willingly give away. It grants clarity in chaos, direction in confusion, strength in uncertainty. That's why it is feared. Those who surrender their minds become predictable, controllable, easy to influence. But the thinker, the individual who sharpens their awareness, cannot be swayed by slogans, emotions, or superficial truths. Their authority originates from within. That makes them untouchable. Thought is the final frontier of freedom. It cannot be stolen. It cannot be silenced unless you choose silence. It cannot be taxed, weakened, or manipulated without your consent. The world profits from distraction. It feeds on noise. It rewards conformity. But thinking, truly thinking, is the act that breaks the system's grip. To think is to declare, "My mind belongs to me." Machiavelli knew that self-mastery is the highest form of power. Those who rule themselves are untouched by circumstance. While the masses chase illusions, the thinker designs his path with awareness, strategy, and intention. Abandoning thought is surrender. Preserving it is power. Don't trade your mind for ease. Don't trade your awareness for approval. Don't trade your freedom for the comfort of fitting in. Your mind is the fortress the world wants to breach. Guard it, train it, strengthen it. If this message resonates with you, let it sharpen you. Let it wake you. Let it anchor you in awareness. The world will mock the thinker until it needs him. And when everyone else collapses under illusion, the thinker remains standing. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable in thought. Stupidity is not the absence of intelligence. It is the refusal to use it. And every day, the world surrounds you with distractions, illusions, and comforting lies designed to make that refusal easy. Society trains people to follow patterns, mimic opinions, and surrender awareness in exchange for belonging. The crowd repeats what it hears. It obeys what it's told. It believes what feels good instead of examining what is true. But here's the Machiavellian truth. Safety built on conformity is an illusion. Because the moment you surrender your mind, you surrender everything, your judgment, your direction, your identity, your future. The world doesn't have to control a person who refuses to think. That person is already controlled. True freedom begins where obedience ends. The person who thinks independently becomes the last untouchable force in a world obsessed with conformity. Every thought you sharpen, every question you ask, every moment you choose awareness over impulse strengthens the mental fortress that separates you from the masses. That fortress isn't built from knowledge alone. It's built from discipline, from reflection, from the courage to stand alone in a world that fears solitude. Awareness is action. It's the decision to see beyond the surface, to examine motives, to identify illusions before they trap you. It is the refusal to let the crowd dictate your perception. When you think independently, you begin to see what others overlook. The subtle manipulations, the manufactured narratives, the emotional traps designed to keep you compliant. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He understood that power always belongs to the few who remain awake while the majority sleepwalk through their lives. The independent mind is feared because it cannot be predicted. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be shaped by noise or seduced by comfort. It is the ultimate threat to any system built on blind obedience. And yes, the world will resist you for thinking. It will mock you, isolate you, misunderstand you. But that resistance is proof that you've stepped outside the invisible cage. The crowd defends its illusions fiercely, because without them, it must face reality. And reality is something only the aware have the strength to confront. The thinker rises not by aggression, but by clarity. Not by force, but by perception. When others crumble under pressure, distraction, or chaos, the thinker remains steady because he doesn't rely on external certainty. His strength originates within. So don't surrender your mind for convenience. Don't give up your awareness to gain approval. Don't follow illusions that comfort the majority while suffocating your potential. You are not meant to echo the world. You are meant to outthink it. Your power begins with your perception. Your freedom begins with your awareness. Your future begins with your decision to think. In the end, This is the message I want you to carry forward. Your mind is your final and greatest possession. Guard it with the same intensity you guard your dreams. Strengthen it with the same discipline you strengthen your body. Let it become the one thing the world cannot influence, corrupt, or steal. Because once your mind becomes untouchable, everything else becomes possible. If this resonates with you, share it. Spread awareness. Strengthen others who are ready to wake up. And above all, continue sharpening the one weapon that separates you from the obedient crowd, your independent thought.